Somewhere in America right now, there's someone sitting on roughly 280 pounds of physical silver. Maybe it's stacked in a safe, sitting in a vault, or stored somewhere nobody else knows about. At today's prices, that's a serious amount of money sitting in metal. And that person probably believes they're protected. Protected from inflation, protected from a weaker dollar, protected from whatever comes next. But here's the uncomfortable question. This video is going to answer, what if owning 280 pounds of silver still isn't enough? What if the amount of silver you own matters less than the forces controlling the market around it? Forces playing out in China's reserves, global inventories, industrial demand, and a silver market that has been running persistent deficits? Because the real silver story may be much bigger than the stack sitting in your safe. And this matters right now because two very different forces are colliding in the precious metals market. China's central bank has continued building its gold reserves over an extended period, while silver has been dealing with persistent supply deficits that are increasingly being treated as a structural problem rather than a temporary shortage. On the surface, those stories look completely different. They're not, because both point to the same bigger question. What happens when demand keeps growing while the supply of available metal struggles to keep up? And by the end of this video, you'll understand why silver may be the more urgent part of that story, and why simply owning a large amount of physical silver doesn't automatically mean you're fully protected. If money, gold, silver, and protecting what you've built matter to you, go ahead and subscribe to Money Insiders and tap like on this video. We break down financial stories like this one in plain English, without the jargon and without the hype. So let's get into it. Start with what we actually know, because this part isn't speculation. China's central bank has been steadily adding gold to its official reserves, extending a long-running buying streak that has lasted for more than a year and a half. In June, the People's Bank of China added roughly 15 tons of gold to its reserves. And here's why that matters. This wasn't simply a short-term trade based on one day's price movement. Central bank purchases are strategic decisions that can continue across very different market conditions. China isn't trying to predict every weekly move in gold. It's gradually increasing the role of gold in its official reserves. And that tells us something important about the long-term demand underneath the precious metals market. Why does that matter to someone watching this video who has never touched a gold bar in their life? Because when a central bank continues accumulating an asset over time, it's sending a very different signal from a short-term trader chasing momentum. Central banks manage reserves with a much longer horizon. China's declared gold holdings have risen substantially over the years, yet gold still represents only a relatively small share of its overall foreign exchange reserves. In other words, China isn't going all in on gold. It's gradually increasing its exposure, purchase by purchase, while maintaining a much broader reserve portfolio. And that distinction becomes important when we turn back to silver, because silver has a completely different supply and demand structure, and that is where the 280-pound question starts to get really interesting. That last point deserves a second look, because it changes how we should think about precious metals. China's buying has continued through very different Federal Reserve environments, suggesting that at least part of that demand isn't about predicting the next rate decision or chasing a short-term price move. For American savers, that's worth paying attention to. We're often taught that gold and silver are primarily driven by the Fed, interest rates, and the dollar, but a sovereign reserve manager can be operating on a completely different timeline. So if China's motivation isn't simply about catching the next rally, what exactly is it trying to accomplish? The most commonly cited explanation is diversification, reducing reliance on any single currency, particularly the US dollar, as the backbone of national reserves. And China isn't the only central bank adding gold. Official sector demand has remained historically strong across several countries. But here's where the story takes a turn. Gold's reserve role is important, but it isn't the biggest warning sign in this video. The bigger question is sitting in the silver market. And once you understand what's happening there, the idea that simply owning a large amount of silver automatically makes you safe starts to look a lot less obvious. Here's where the numbers get genuinely interesting. According to the Silver Institute's World Silver Survey 2026, produced with Metals Focus, the global silver market is projected to remain in a supply deficit for a sixth consecutive year. The 2025 deficit was estimated at roughly 40.3 million ounces, while the 2026 forecast puts the shortfall at around 46.3 million ounces. The exact size of the deficit can vary between research firms depending on how they account for recycling, inventories, and other above-ground sources. But the bigger point is much harder to ignore. Silver demand has been exceeding newly available supply for years. And that raises a very uncomfortable question for anyone holding physical silver. If the market is already drawing on existing inventories to fill the gap, what happens when that available cushion gets smaller? So what does a persistent deficit actually mean in plain English? It means the market is relying on existing above-ground stocks to help cover the gap between what people want and what mines and recyclers can supply. Think of it like a household slowly drawing down its savings because the paycheck doesn't quite cover the bills. You can do that for a while, but the longer it continues, the more important that remaining cushion becomes. And silver has another problem. Much of the world's silver is produced as a byproduct of mining other metals, including copper, gold, lead, and zinc. So higher silver prices don't automatically mean miners can instantly flood the market with new silver. Supply responds slowly. That's why a persistent deficit can become a structural issue rather than something that disappears after one strong quarter. Now here's the contradiction that makes this story much more interesting. You might assume that if the silver market is running a larger deficit, industrial demand must be exploding. Solar panels, electronics, electric vehicles, all of those industries use silver. But the latest projections point in a more complicated direction. Industrial demand is expected to decline in 2026. Partly because solar manufacturers have been working aggressively to use less silver per panel and substitute other materials where possible, as silver prices have risen. So now we have a much bigger question. If industrial demand is slowing and mine supply isn't growing dramatically, why is the silver market still expected to remain in deficit? Where is the demand coming from? And what happens if that demand accelerates again? The answer is investment demand. Coin and bar purchases are expected to remain a major source of physical silver demand in 2026, even as industrial demand faces pressure from efforts to reduce the amount of silver used in manufacturing. In plain English, investors are absorbing physical silver at a time when industrial users are trying to use less of it. That's an important shift, because it means the silver story isn't simply about factories needing more metal. It's also about investors choosing to hold silver as a store of value. And that creates a very different kind of demand. Metal that gets bought and held rather than immediately consumed. When investment demand and industrial demand are pulling on the same finite supply from opposite directions, even a relatively small change in either one can have an outsized effect on the market. And that's one reason silver deserves much more attention than it usually gets. There's another piece of evidence worth putting on the table here, and it's the kind of metric professional metals traders watch closely, the gold to silver ratio. It's simply the price of gold divided by the price of silver. In other words, how many ounces of silver it takes to equal the value of 1 ounce of gold. The ratio has fallen dramatically from the much higher levels seen in 2025, showing that silver has gained significantly against gold. When the ratio compresses, silver is outperforming gold. Historically, periods of rapid ratio compression can signal that investors are moving towards silver's higher volatility profile in search of greater upside. But this is not a guarantee. The ratio can reverse just as quickly. What it does tell us is that silver has become a much more powerful part of the precious metal story than its traditional reputation as gold's quieter cousin would suggest. So where do prices actually stand right now, and what's the Federal Reserve's role in all of this? As we move through August 2026, gold is trading around the mid-4,000s per ounce, while silver is trading around the mid-60s. Both metals remain at historically elevated levels after an extraordinary run earlier in the year, followed by a significant correction and then a recovery. And this is where the story becomes personal for anyone with a savings account, a retirement fund, or a mortgage. Because one of the biggest forces behind those price swings is still the same institution we've been talking about throughout this video, the Federal Reserve. Here's the part most financial content gets lazy about, so let's actually explain it. Gold and silver don't pay you interest. When you hold cash in a savings account or a bond, you're compensated for waiting. When you hold physical metal, you're not. So when inflation-adjusted interest rates become more attractive elsewhere, the opportunity cost of holding gold and silver rises. That's what analysts mean when they talk about real yields, interest rates adjusted for inflation. Higher real yields can weigh on precious metals, while falling real yields can make them more attractive. The Fed held its benchmark rate steady at its July meeting, but the market has been focused on a much more unusual question heading into September. Could policymakers actually raise rates rather than cut them? That expectation has moved sharply as new employment and inflation data have arrived. And that volatility in rate expectations is one of the biggest reasons gold and silver have been so difficult to predict. Think about what that means for a moment. In a normal cycle, when inflation runs hot and the Fed becomes more aggressive, the story is relatively simple. Rates and real yields rise, and precious metals can come under pressure. But this year, gold and silver have shown remarkable strength despite that risk. Central bank demand, persistent silver market tightness, investment demand, and geopolitical uncertainty have all been competing with the traditional headwind from higher rates. That's why professional forecasts are so divided. Some analysts see limited upside from here. Others see the potential for another major leg higher if the Fed eventually moves toward easier policy and the structural demand story remains intact. Those forecasts aren't promises. They're different answers to the same unanswered question. Which force wins? tighter monetary policy, or the structural demand supporting precious metals. It helps to walk through what each path could actually mean, since nobody watching this knows for certain which one plays out. If the Fed does end up hiking in September because energy-driven inflation refuses to cool, that tends to push real yields higher, which historically makes gold and silver less attractive relative to interest-bearing cash and short-term bonds. A headwind for metals, but also a small silver lining for anyone parking savings in a high-yield account, since those rates would likely stay elevated too. Borrowers, on the other hand, would feel the opposite side of that coin, with mortgage rates and other borrowing costs staying higher for longer. If instead the Fed holds steady or eventually pivots toward cuts, as some of the softer inflation prints in recent weeks have hinted is possible, real yields would likely ease, which is typically supportive for gold and silver, but savers would see the return on their cash accounts shrink at the same time. Neither path is automatically good or bad for everyone. A retiree living off interest income experiences a Fed hike very differently than a young saver trying to build a metals position at a lower entry price. That's the part of the story that rarely makes it into a headline. The same Fed decision can be a tailwind for one household and a headwind for another, depending on what they already own. This is where we come back to that person with 280 pounds of silver, because now you have enough context to actually answer the question in the title. At roughly $65 an ounce, 280 ordinary pounds of silver converts to about 4,081 troy ounces, the unit the precious metals market actually uses, putting the stack at roughly $265,000 at that price. That's a substantial amount of wealth. But here's the uncomfortable part. Not enough to save you has nothing to do with whether $265,000 sounds like a lot of money. It comes down to what that silver can actually protect you from, how quickly you can access its value, what happens to its purchasing power, and what risks physical ownership cannot eliminate. And that's the part almost nobody explains when they tell you to simply stack more ounces. Consider what happened in 1980 when the Hunt brothers' attempt to build a massive position in silver helped to drive prices toward $50 an ounce before the market reversed violently. Changes to exchange margin requirements and trading rules played a major role in that reversal. It's a useful historical reminder that precious metals markets don't move on supply and demand alone. Positioning, leverage, liquidity, and exchange rules can all change the outcome very quickly, and the history of monetary metals goes back even further. In 1933, the U.S. government required most Americans to surrender monetary gold under Executive Order 6102, while silver was not covered by that order. Nothing in that history proves that the same thing will happen to silver today. It doesn't, but it does establish an important principle. Owning physical metal is not the same thing as being protected from every possible financial or policy risk. The rules around monetary assets can change, and individual holders have very little control over those rules. There are more everyday versions of this same lesson too. Physical silver isn't something you can normally spend at a grocery store. If you need to sell a large stack, you have to find a buyer, deal with the bid-ask spread, and potentially account for storage, insurance, transaction costs, and taxes. In the United States, physical precious metals can also receive different tax treatment from stocks and other investments, depending on how they're held and your individual circumstances. None of that makes silver a bad asset to own. It simply means that liquidity matters just as much as ounces. A central bank like the PBOC operates with institutional access, enormous scale, and a completely different objective from an individual holding silver in a home safe. So comparing the two isn't really apples to apples. And that's exactly why the idea that more silver automatically means more protection is too simple. The real question isn't just how much silver do you own? It's what problem are those ounces actually solving for you? So does the evidence actually support the idea that even a large amount of silver might not be enough? The honest answer is, it depends on what you're asking that silver to do. If the goal is to hedge against currency debasement and diversify a long-term portfolio, the persistent silver deficit, strong investment demand, and continued central bank accumulation of gold all point to meaningful structural forces behind precious metals. But if the goal is guaranteed, instant financial protection in every possible crisis, then no amount of silver can make that promise. Liquidity, storage, taxes, transaction costs, timing, diversification, and the rules governing the markets all matter. 280 pounds of silver can represent substantial wealth, but substantial wealth is not the same thing as complete financial security. That's the distinction this entire story comes down to. So here's the mental model to take away from all of this, whether you own 1 ounce of silver or none at all. When central banks continue accumulating gold through different market conditions, that's a signal of long-term reserve strategy, not a countdown clock telling you where prices will be tomorrow. When silver repeatedly runs deficits while investors continue demanding physical metal, it tells you that supply, investment behavior, and industrial demand are interacting in a market that can become tight very quickly. And when the Fed's next move remains uncertain, the honest answer is that nobody knows exactly what happens next. What we do know is what the data shows, what history has shown us, and what questions you should ask before deciding what silver, gold, or even cash is actually protecting you from. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insiders and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next. This video is AI-generated.